Here's Mr. Lee, a 62-year-old man running in Central Park. His heart is in perfect condition, and his blood flow just couldn't get any smoother. But over the course of several months and years, Mr. Lee develops a sedentary lifestyle. He starts eating junk food and doesn't take care of his health. He starts to smoke several times during the day. So the next time Mr. Lee goes out for a run, he stops because he develops severe crushing chest pain. What I just described to you are the symptoms of an atherosclerotic lesion which has compromised Mr. Lee's blood flow to the heart. And because of that, he is now rushed to the hospital to receive emergency care. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So today's topic is atherosclerosis. Now there are many different steps that lead to atherosclerosis, so make sure you watch this video till the end so you understand every single step. And don't miss out the high yield complications that I have discussed in the end of this video. So let's get to it. So by definition, atherosclerosis is a chronic inflammatory disease of the arterial wall. You must understand that this is a chronic inflammatory disease. This is not a disease that comes into play within a night, a day, or several weeks. This is a disease that occurs from months over to years. And then the artery is involved in atherosclerosis. Now, atherosclerosis is characterized by the formation of plaques. Now, what are plaques? Plaques are something that we'll be discussing in the video, and you'll have a better understanding of what they are. Just keep watching. And then, what do these plaques actually do? Now, they may narrow the arterial wall or they may lead to hardening of the arteries. So, these both are complications amongst other complications as well. So, watch this video till the end and you'll understand what I'm talking to you about. Now, atherosclerosis, as you can see in this diagram, can lead to these three things. So as you can see in this diagram, the first one, the artery is not narrowed, but you can see an atherosclerotic lesion forming. In the second diagram, you can see that there is ischemia. Now, what is ischemia? Ischemia basically means there is reduced blood flow to a specific organ maybe or a specific body part. And there is only limitation of blood flow. There is not complete obstruction of blood flow. But as you can see in the third diagram, now there is complete blood flow obstruction and this person has an infarction. And if that infarction is not treated on time, if the person is not rushed to the hospital or given any emergency care, what's going to happen? The person will most likely die. Again, if you're talking about either maybe stroke as brain or the heart. So as you can see in this diagram here, you can see an arterial wall over here, and the cells that line the innermost part of the arterial walls are called the endothelial cells. Now, endothelial cells have many different functions, and because of endothelial cells, the artery always has laminar blood flow and there is no obstruction and the blood flows smoothly. So it regulates vascular tone. It controls vasoconstriction and vasodilation. It also controls inflammatory cell adhesion and diapedesis. So endothelial cells prevent WBCs from sticking onto them. This is a very important step that we'll be talking about soon. And the third one is that it maintains an antithrombotic state. So if a person has an antithrombotic state, what would happen? The blood would flow smoothly. Now, what if there were endothelial dysfunction? What would happen? So if there were endothelial dysfunction, what would happen is that all of these factors would be the opposite. There will be vasoconstriction. There will be cell adhesion and diapedesis, and then there will be thrombosis. So now, let's talk about the vessel structure, and this is a very important part of this video because this will help you to understand why most of the steps involved in atherosclerosis happen in the tunica intima. So you need to know your artery structure well. So first of all, you have the endothelial cells lining the arterial innermost lining of the arterial wall. Then below that, you have the extracellular matrix, which has collagen, elastin, all of these things, glycoproteins. and this is known as the ECM or the extracellular matrix. Now the endothelial cells and the extracellular matrix, they both together combine and form the tunica intima. Then you have the internal elastic membrane. Now the internal elastic membrane is something that separates the tunica intima from the tunica media. What do you have in tunica media? You have smooth muscle cells, you have elastic fibers, and then these two both make up your tunica media. After that, you have the external elastic membrane. Now the external elastic membrane separates the tunica media from the tunica adventitia. And so as you can see in this part of the diagram, you have the tunica adventitia. So now, how does the endothelial cell actually get damaged? But before that, let us briefly see the components of blood that would be involved in this pathological process. You have the RBCs, you have the WBCs, and you have the LDL containing cholesterol. So it's LDL-C for cholesterol. So what are the most common risk factors or the most common causes for endothelial dysfunction? These are hyperlipidemia. If you have a person who has hyperlipidemia, what would happen is that he would have more LDL, and more LDL with more cholesterol. If there are other factors promoting endothelial dysfunction, there will be more LDL, and more LDL means more atherosclerosis. The other one is hypertension. Hypertension is a known cause for endothelial dysfunction. Diabetes mellitus, smoking, and chronic inflammation. So these 5 are the most commonly found risk factors for atherosclerotic lesions, and this is the first step in endothelial dysfunction. So now the endothelial dysfunction has occurred. So endothelial cells have damaged. So what do? They immediately express adhesion molecules. So you have VCAM1 and ICAM1, both are adhesion molecules. Once those adhesion molecules have been expressed, LDL finds a way. LDL is like, oh wow, you know what? The door is open for us. So they come down to the extracellular matrix. Now, in normal endothelial cells are not damaged, they are not dysfunctional, they are normal, LDL normally does not come to the extracellular matrix unless there is some transporter involved. But this is open play for the LDL. So LDL comes inside the extracellular matrix. And with that, you can see there are proteoglycans, as we discussed in the extracellular matrix. Now, what do these proteoglycans do? This is a very important step. They form bonds with the LDL, more so like trapping them within the extracellular matrix. So now the LDL has come inside the extracellular matrix, or mostly the proteoglycans have trapped them with bonds. And so the myeloperoxidase, MPO, or reactive oxygen species, they come in and they oxidize the LDL. So now you have oxidized LDL. This is a very crucial step because oxidized LDL is a very potent pro-inflammatory molecule. And this, what would oxidized LDL do, would be that it induces the endothelial cells to express even more adhesion molecules and then release cytokines. So what would happen is that the endothelial cell would express more adhesion molecules and it would release more cytokines, attracting WBCs into the extracellular matrix. So here you can see in this diagram that WBC has attached to the adhesion molecule, and now with a special process known as diapedesis, the WBC or the monocyte, which was previously in the blood, has now come into the extracellular matrix. And as you can see in this diagram, the monocyte is sort of squeezed into the extracellular matrix, and that's what adhesion molecules help with. They help with diapedesis, which is basically helping the monocyte roll into the extracellular matrix. As soon as it comes into the extracellular matrix, now it's called a macrophage. So now you must know that a macrophage has a scavenger receptor on its cell surface. So what does a scavenger receptor do? It helps to identify the oxidized LDL, and it goes out and about migrating to different parts of the extracellular matrix, and it eats up the oxidized LDL. So after eating the oxidized LDL, as you can see here, it just goes about in random places and finds that LDL. Now over the period of time, what happens is that it has ate a lot of oxidized LDL. So much so that when you look under a microscope, you'd see a foam under the microscope. And this is what a foam cell is known as. Macrophages eating loads and loads of oxidized LDL. And this is the first characteristic lesion of the atherosclerotic lesion. And this, when many foam cells combine, it can give a fatty streak, which is the most important first step in atherosclerotic lesion formation. Another thing which you must keep in mind is, let's talk about smooth muscles, which are first in the tunica media. So what happens is the tunica media migrate into the tunica intima, and that is why the arterial structure was so important to first understand, because if you understand this step would be very easy for you. So it migrates from the tunica media into the tunica intima, and then just like a macrophage, the smooth muscle also eats up the oxidized LDL. So if smooth muscles also eat oxidized LDL, what happens? It also becomes a foam cell. Now, a macrophage can eat only so much of oxidized LDL. So if it eats more than its limits, what happens is that it just bursts. And when it bursts, what happens is that oxidized LDL is released into the extracellular matrix, and the macrophage then becomes a dead cell. And the oxidized LDL, as I talked about, is a very potent pro-inflammatory molecule, and this just sends everything back into spiral, because oxidized LDL even signals the endothelial cells to secrete more cytokines and more adhesion molecules, and then even more LDL, the unoxidized LDL, they even more come inside of the extracellular matrix, and this whole step just it's just a cascade, and there's positive feedback over and over again, so much so that these steps are constantly occurring within your vessel wall if you're talking about atherosclerosis. So now the macrophage, as you can see, has died, and I have you can visually see it by the gray structures below the smooth muscle cells. So over the course of period of time, smooth muscles synthesize collagen, elastin, and proteoglycans. So I have taken green for the collagen and blue for elastin. Always remember, there's always a bit more collagen than elastin. So it forms a layer over the dead tissue or the smooth muscles, and it just slowly increases in size, because remember, the positive feedback loop is constantly occurring in the background, and I have left that out because the diagram will become very much cluttered. But always remember that those things are constantly occurring. So what happens now is that the collagen, it keeps on increasing, so much so that then it forms a sort of a hill type structure beneath the endothelium. And remember that there is an endothelial lining present on the collagen at this moment in time. So then it happens over the course of period of time, the collagen increases even more, there are more elastin fibers, more smooth muscles come, and there are more dead macrophages that get collected, and even oxidized LDL. And this structure is known as a fibrous cap. The collagen that lines the whole of the dead tissue and everything is called a fibrous cap. And the structures below it, most commonly the macrophages that have died, the WBCs, it forms the necrotic core because it's all completely dead tissue. Now remember, thickness of the fibrous cap determines stability of the plate. So if you have a fibrous cap that is very, very thin, it's not stable at all, because just imagine if blood were to flow against the hill type structure, as I talked about, and the collagen fibers are very, very thin, the fibrous cap is very, very unstable, so it can easily break out. But if you have a very thick fibrous cap, what would happen is that it's a very, very stable plate, so it does not get damaged easily and it does not break off very easily. So as you can see now that the endothelial cells, because assuming that the risk factors such as smoking, hypertension, and diabetes still exist, the endothelial cells over the fibrous cap also get damaged. So if they get damaged, remember when we talked about the three most important functions of the endothelials, one of them, or the third one, was thrombosis. it prevents thrombosis. So if endothelial cells are damaged, it would now promote thrombosis. So red blood cells come and they stick on top of the endothelial cells, and this slowly and gradually increases and increases unless it forms a full-fledged thrombus. Now this thrombus can increase in size and block the whole vessel, or it can just dislodge, and once it dislodges, it's called an embolus. Very good. So it forms an embolus, and now this embolus can go obviously and dislodge maybe into another vessel, causing maybe it causes ischemia, or maybe it causes an infarction, and that is relative to the vessel size and other factors. Now you can see that since there was a necrotic core and there were dead cells within the fibrous cap, so remember that calcification always or most probably occurs in dead cells. So when calcium was going by and it found this dead tissue, calcification occurred, and now the whole of the lesion has now been calcified and hardened. This is a complication that we will talk now a little bit ahead in the lecture. But presently, you just need to understand that calcium can come, it can get deposited in the necrotic core, and then once it calcifies, a calcified plaque is even more stable than a thick plaque. So let's go on and now discuss the complications of atherosclerosis. So complication number 1 is plaque rupture. As I talked about, if the plaque is unstable whatsoever, it can lead to thrombosis. So if there's thrombosis, there is complete occlusion of the vessel, any vessel in the body, or there can be ischemia, meaning the blood flow is still going to the body part, but it has obviously decreased. The second one, which is important, and we just talked about it, is calcification. So it can lead to hardening of the arterial wall, and that is what primarily calcification is that it is hardening of the arterial wall. Number 3 is chronic ischemia. So remember, if there is constantly atherosclerotic lesion forming and the risk factors are present and the lesion is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, remember that the vessel, the closed vessel or the narrow lumen, can lead to ischemia, and the ischemia can occur in any part of the body. Atherosclerosis is just not limited to the heart. You might hear most people talk about the heart because it's the most commonly affected organ because of atherosclerosis, and the more serious one. But atherosclerosis can occur in any part of the body, even legs, hands, arms, the brain, kidneys. It can occur anywhere. So this can lead to obviously ischemia, chronic ischemia because of atherosclerosis. Number 4 is aneurysm formation. So now in aneurysms, atherosclerosis is the most important risk factor for aneurysm formation. So we can see in the brain, this is probably a berry aneurysm, and if a berry aneurysm occurs, it can lead to a hemorrhagic stroke. If you have a hemorrhagic stroke, it can be life-threatening, and you have to get that sorted out as soon as possible. In the second diagram, you can see the aorta, and you can see the descending aorta, ascending, descending aorta. So if you have atherosclerosis in this part of the aorta, this can lead to an aneurysm formation. So now you have a couple of risk factors that we talked about in the first part of the video that can promote atherosclerosis or aid in promoting atherosclerosis. Number 1 is obesity. If a person is obese, he's more likely to develop atherosclerosis. Number 2 is fat. If a person has hyperlipidemia, that can promote atherosclerosis. Number 3 is smoking. You have chronic inflammation. You have hypertension. You have diabetes, and then the most important, in my opinion, is sedentary lifestyle. If a person is having a sedentary lifestyle, he is more probably going to develop diabetes, hypertension, chronic inflammation, and he's going to be obese. So sedentary lifestyle is a very important risk factor for atherosclerosis. Now there are certain things you can't really change, and those things are non-modifiable risk factors. They contain your age. So age is a very important factor for atherosclerosis. Number 2 is your gender. So if you are a male, you're more likely to develop atherosclerosis rather than if you are a female. but after menopause, the risk factors are relatively the same, because the main thing that plays a protective role in preventing atherosclerosis in women is the hormone estrogen. And the last one is your genetic makeup. So if your genetic makeup, and if you have a family history of atherosclerosis, or things that can lead to atherosclerosis, or you have a family history in which your family developed complications of atherosclerosis, maybe a heart attack, maybe a stroke, any of those things, then you are also predisposed to those things. Now, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on any further videos. And until next time, goodbye.